Hello, everybody. My name is Tim Tang, and my role in the company is to study market trends and to try to understand where industries are moving in terms of their digital transformation, to try to get ahead of the changes that are taking place, and to make sure our services and solutions align with the industry needs. This morning, I have the great privilege to speak with Taylor of CONEXXUS. He's the Executive Director there. Gray, could you tell us a little bit about your background? What informs your understanding of the C-store industry?
A lot of what I've learned in the convenience store industry is really kind of historical because my family actually had a chain of convenience stores back into the 60s. So when I was 3, my dad opened up his first store. We eventually had 87 across upstate New York. And so I kind of grew up doing a lot of the old analog stuff that, kids do in their father's chains, from, planting trees to helping merchandise stores, to running cash registers. And after a quick stint out in Chicago trading commodities, I went back and started them up in the family business and the gasoline side of the business in the 80s. And we sold out at the end of the 80s. So I got a really good operational framework as to, what are the analog inputs to driving a convenience store chain in the old side. In the 90s, I actually went to work for a Japanese technology company called Undermine, and that was my introduction to the tech side of the convenience store space, where I was using what I learned operationally to kind of automate. And so we started doing some automation stuff, scanning, fuel control, integrated credit, support of outside card readers. And that started my track of being on the technology services provider side. And I eventually went to work for Tokheim and ran their global systems business. And then I went on to Wayne and ran their global product portfolio. In between, I went to NACS and was vice president of research and technology. And the cool thing about that job is that I got a really in-depth view into the metrics of the business. How to measure things that are coming through. And I really learned an appreciation for data flows and data quality in that position. So when the CONEXXUS position opened up, I joined. I'm joining from Austin, Texas, so I've moved from Washington, D.C. I'm now in Central Texas. But yeah, my background has really kind of mirrored the morphing of retail into the digital space because of that.
When we look at the C-store industry, there's a lot of things that are happening. Can you maybe highlight for us what are some of the most important headwinds that are facing the industry? What do we need to be paying attention to?
To me, there's a lot. We have traditional moat of smokes, cokes, and gasoline, and that's what justifies our retail footprint. One of the headwinds we know is that the whole idea of mobility is going to be changing in the future. It certainly got accelerated, and we got a glimpse into the future through pandemic. But we've had demand destruction in the fuels markets now going on for 5 years, if not more, of about 1% drop. And some of that, it's not all coming from EVs and alternative fuel types of things. It's really coming from a cycle of the U.S. fleet where newer cars have far better mileage. In fact, I've got a 2016 Honda Pilot that gets 20% better mileage than my 2005 Honda Pilot did. So you can just see that we're getting more efficient on our drivetrains. So that's one thing that's going that's slowly moving away. The other thing that came out from the pandemic is just a hybrid commerce. And there was a great article today in Nielsen, or actually yesterday in Nielsen, that kind of brings out what they call the convenience 2.0, the new convenience, which is, we used to be far more convenient than a Walmart. Well, now what happens if Walmart can take their entire inventory and deliver it to you within an hour? All of a sudden, a convenience store doesn't have the patina that it did in the past. And I think that's one of the things that we need to spend more time talking about, which is, how do we get our stores online quickly? How do we reinforce our position as that place around the corner that can serve you in your 1 hour consumption window, and establish that place, because we're going to have a lot of people going after that 1 hour window.
Yeah, it is interesting as you think about how the C-store industry has evolved, right? We've gone, when you're talking about demand destruction, I think the first thing that comes to mind is what's happening with tobacco and how the industry has moved into the kind of restaurant space. And now we see the dollar stores kind of moving in, we see grocery kind of moving in. There's kind of multiple dimensions to the kind of mix of industries in terms of their competitive framework, isn't there?
Channel blur, make it your friend, because channel blur is coming. Um, Coming out of pandemic, the national restaurant folks have reported that upwards of 60% of the dining in-room dining restaurants are going to go out of business. Okay, that's a huge opportunity for us to fill that in. You mentioned tobacco. Tobacco's in demand destruction as well. We tend to be a little bit fat and happy, but that's because we haven't seen the demand destruction hitting us yet. We've seen CVS cycle $2 billion of their tobacco sales when they exited, and that came to our market. We're seeing Walmart and Walgreens de-emphasize the tobacco category, so we're picking that up. Today, we sell about 90% of the tobacco and nicotine products out there in the marketplace, and we're very quickly becoming that sole business that does sell it, and we're going to start experiencing then the true net demand destruction.
And there's some interesting things that are happening with regards to outdoor EMV, liability shift, and cybersecurity and that kind of continue to kind of hold the industry in kind of a stasis mode for a while. Where do you see the opportunities in the C-store industry? What should we be focused on in terms of trying to grow and develop our businesses?
Well, EMV is a great challenge for us, and we've been ignoring this, this 800-pound gorilla, which is connectivity. When you talk to the guys in the major oil business, they leave a lot of the connectivity up to their retailers. I mean, they're doing managed endpoint services and all that stuff, but the bandwidth is usually what's the cheapest stuff I can get, because it's a cost. I think EMV is driving home this. I've used now 2 EMV terminals, one at Costco and one at another brand in our industry, and it's a slow transaction. And so this is Costco, right? There's a lot more data in that cryptogram going back and forth. So are we set up to do that, or are we just going to tell customers it's going to take you a lot longer to do a transaction at the pump? And I think we need to get serious about how do we get really fast data connections to our stores that are reliable. And the collateral benefit on that is that helps us get into the hybrid channel selling, but it also allows us now to collect and a lot more of the data that's going to be coming out of that store, the data opportunity, realize the opportunity. So I can see stores now that are trickling their T-logs back to a cloud system or a cloud warehouse system so that they can do real-time analytics. And then I can see IoT coming out into the store because, we should be benchmarking Amazon. Why does Amazon do so well in knowing what I want as a customer? It's because they track everything I do when I'm on the Amazon website. So why wouldn't we track everything that a consumer does when they're on our website, which is at a physical location? And that's going to require bandwidth, like 5x the bandwidth we're used to today. And so that to me is one of those fundamental things that we just need to get ready, for. So even your edge stores, you've got to figure out a way to reliably get data back or outside of the industry, and do it in a PCI fashion, right? That's another collar that we have to deal with, which is, you just can't go down and tag a store and say, give me your T-log. That violates PCI. So we've got a lot of things to think about in just that infrastructural sense.
You make there's quite a lot in what you just said there. I think there's a kind of a meaningful transition from where we were. Credit card transactions were pretty simple. You send it in, you get the response back, and you're done. With the EMV, like you said, there's a lot of handshaking going back, and that has meaningful impact to the customer experience. And when they're standing there in front of the register trying to get in, or standing in the forecourt trying to buy their fuel and having to wait, 10 seconds, 20 seconds, and so on and so forth. So there's many things to think about in terms of customer experience in that state. Could you maybe walk us through what you've seen in terms of technology evolutions? What were some of the key milestones when we think about technology in the C-store industry?
Yes. So going back to the first big driver in technology in the industry was pay at the pump. Prior to pay at the pump, it was optional whether you had integrated fuel control in your point of sale. Pay at the pump drove it home. You have to have integrated because you also need to have integrated payment. And so that was a big driver for the Verifone Ruby. That was a big driver for the Omron 5560. These highly capable but firmware-based electronic cash registers that, by the way, could also scan 20,000 items. And that was a big enabler. So people bought it to do the fuel control and the island control. And then all of a sudden they said, well, wait a minute, I can start doing some scanning on this thing. And that's when, 30 years after or 25 years after the first scanner was installed at a Mars supermarket, that's when C-stores started saying, well, customers expect us to scan because they want price accuracy. And, we also need some accuracy. We got to get control over inventory. So the mid 90s to 2005 was all about how do I do inventory control and set up a really good price book? So they leveraged the scanning, but then they started going with open systems products that basically could do far better scanning and inventory control, and also the one shots, because our inventory wasn't that, wasn't that barcoded. So the ability to use touchscreen, and so that's what brought out the Radiant side of the business, and that was one driver. In this century, the drivers has been payments, which to me is really kind of frustrating, because payments should be one of the easiest things in the world, but it's not. So PCI drove the upgrades around 2010, and then EMV drove further upgrades that we're seeing today. And with those systems, though, come ancillary benefits and things that allow us to improve our operations that maybe we didn't, think about them when we chose the system. So when it comes to a new EMV system, for instance, well, now can I drive video at the dispenser because I put EMV in with a touchscreen monitor? So we pick up the harmonic capabilities with these mandates that come along, and that's really been the driver for us.
It's interesting to see kind of outdoor EMV, this liability shift, this requirement that you need to be able to take chip transactions in the forecourt. And this has been an onerous requirement that's sat on the industry for several years now. And in terms of kind of holding back, this became the priority in terms of innovation. Can you maybe, if we take a step back and take a look at the C-store industry, 153,000 some stores in North America, how would you characterize the adoption of technology? It seems like we have pretty wide spectrum of almost no technology to very, very high technology in terms of its use and application.
Sure. It's first of all, we tend to be behind the curve, and we're behind the curve, but because we have this one problem that makes us unique. Walmart's at the front of the curve. That's because Walmart has got big stores. They've got systems administrators on site. They have the scale to do whatever they really want to do, and they've been adopting open systems for a long time. We have to operate these little stores that do a lot of stuff. So we're a grocery store, we're a gasoline station, we're a quick serve restaurant. Oh, and by the way, I've only got 13 employees in that store, so it's not like I got anybody with a tech degree who can sit there and support it. It's all got to be remote supported. So we need highly resilient systems that can stand up to the transaction loads that we're dealing with. So that gives us an inherent issue. It's got to be mature technology. We just can't throw stuff out there. The other thing is that there's a bifurcation of positioning within the marketplace. So when I look at a Sheetz or a Wawa or a Quick Trip or a KT or a Come and Go, those are all familiar brands. Casey's, those are all familiar brands that are carrying their own gasoline brand. They're managing their own payment system, and so what's happening is that they now have total control over the tech stack. And they can do whatever they want to, and they can invest in bigger data. They've got inventory. They're responsible for the whole P&L of the store. On the other side of the marketplace, we have major oil company branded folks, and so you can think in terms of like QuickCheck. Kevin Smart's chain. He's chairman of NACS. He's got about 45 Exxon Mobils. He's got 5 Valeros. They all have different technologies and different versions of code, and he's got to support that and run a unified chain off of 2 disparate point-of-sale systems that he has very little control over. And in fact, they're also now bringing in mobile applications, that are, this is Exxon's, this is Valero. So how does he position himself from a marketing perspective and a data perspective? And really what it boils down to is you get only as much water out of that data pipe as the smallest pipe in the system. And so if you've got a dysfunctional system from one MOC brand over here, that's it. That's your basis for your chain management. And so what we're trying to do as standards is try to lift everybody up so that everybody's providing the same basic stuff, but then also use standards to give people the flexibility to push the other brands that are existing in that location. I think it's a great opportunity for us to do it because oil companies have got great pockets, they've got great technologists. So now how do we make this so that, their distribution, their marketing channel can coexist and thrive within that? Because I think that's going to be a big challenge for us going forward.
One of the things that makes the C-store industry so very different from QSR, from groceries, is exactly what you were touching on, the dynamic between the major oils and the retail brand. You've got a major oil brand that's basically driving the traffic into the forecourt, and then you have an operator who has a retail brand that they're trying to promote to as well to distinguish themselves from their competitors. how does that dynamic work? What's an operator to do in order to take advantage of the fuel brand's presence to kind of grow their retail business where the profitability is?
So we haven't done it yet. I mean, that to me is a great challenge for us because everybody likes to talk about, well, how do I convert my fuel customer to an in-store customer? It is really difficult to do if they exist in a major oil brand on the fuel island and they have no visibility into what you're doing in your store. And if we start looking at the dispenser environment as a website instead of a dispenser environment, then all of a sudden a lot of things start opening up. So, if I'm a major oil brand, I really am concerned about how I do the payment, how I sell the fuel, that it's accurate and so forth. But then there's this dead space in there. If I can open that up so that the store can then come in and sell me digitally on other things, including projecting their entire POS and inventory out on the screen. That's really, really where we're trying to go. That customer then can do a curbside collect transaction off of that screen. So consumer touch points and spaces and moving capabilities into all the consumer touch points to me is a great opportunity that we should be looking at. How can an oil brand frame the transaction in an island, leave enough space in between where there's enough capability for that retailer to sell stuff inside the store and attract the consumer? Everybody wins in that situation because if I'm an oil company, I've got to be very concerned about the overall profitability of that site. I have little to do with what happens inside the store, but if that store isn't successful, they can't sell tobacco because they don't have age verification and they lose their license. That's 70% of their profits, is inside the store, and about a third of those profits are coming from age-gated products. If they can't do that, then they can't sell my fuel, and I can't preserve my channel. So we've got a vested interest together to make this work.
It seems like one of the key things in terms of converting that fuel patron into a retail patron is the loyalty element. Can you kind of comment on that? Can you speak to kind of what should operators be thinking about in terms of loyalty, and how do they think about it in terms of maximizing the opportunity, but also dealing with the liabilities?
Yeah, I wish we were doing this conversation 5 days from now because I'm in the middle of the NACS MIT program, and we're focusing on loyalty in my group, and it's been interesting because I think from a loyalty perspective, we've been kind of hammering it from what's good for me as the retailer. You, Mr. Customer, you do this, right? Buy more of my gas and I'll give you more of your more stuff. And I think what's emerging in our group right now is, look, let's start with the customer and move backwards. Because if the customer, what is loyalty? Loyalty is emotional. It is not a transactional thing. I've heard stories of people who have loyalty programs with payment, and if you use all of their things, you can get 15 cents off a gallon and nobody uses it, or only a third of the customers use it. So it's not purely economic driven, it's very emotional. Now, to get to somebody's emotion, and it sounds kind of odd to say this, but to get to somebody's emotion, you got to know more about them. What are their pain points? And so if loyalty is really about solving a consumer's issues, whatever they may be, and so it could be a mom driving down I-35 who's got a 3-year-old who really needs to go to the bathroom, and I'm Buc-ee's, but I send them over to a Starbucks because it's nearby, out of my own loyalty program because I'm solving that consumer's problem. I love Buc-ee's, even though I use the Starbucks bathroom, because Buc-ee's solved my problem for me. And that's the type of thing we need to get to, which is really about interaction. Data flows back and forth, collecting meaningful data in a standardized way that can be assessed, and that's a problem with us. And then starting to train off of that data, big sets of data, and understand what the individual is. So instead of having 2 personas of customers, male, female, or Bubba, whatever, we need to start thinking in terms of how do I have 100,000 personas so I can get my offers more targeted. I think all of us are frustrated. You go up on a website, you look at one thing. Go look at garden tools. For the next 5 days, while you're surfing the web, nothing but garden tools come up. I just wanted to look at a garden tool. It's not like I'm, a garden tool maven. So, that to me is creepy, and it's not solving my problem. And so it's a fine line, and we can learn an awful lot from watching Amazon and from watching these other players who do it really well online.
One of the challenges about loyalty, though, is it's understanding your customer, as you were alluding to. And that means, like you said, data. But with the California Consumer Protection Act, I mean CCPA, CPRA, there are some meaningful liabilities as it relates to privacy concerns around consumer data. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, so California, in true California fashion, just passed 206, which was they hadn't even waited to see what the other resolution was. They doubled down on it and put new resolutions on it. So we're going to be waiting for the state's AG to come out with the interpretation on it. But just, imagine, take GDPR. We've always been telling people GDPR is the global standard, absent of anything else, and take GDPR and probably double it. Your ability to casually collect information from the consumer is going to come under challenge. And there's a couple of things that NACS and CONEXXUS have been working on that alleviate that. We firmly believe that we need to accelerate the move from physical identity to digital identity that's tokenized and representational and anonymized. In other words, what we would like to see is the consumer have, instead of a passport, a driver's license, and all these artifacts in their wallet, we would like to have the consumer have tokenized versions of every one of those things so that I can prove that I am indeed able to work at your store, but I don't have to give you my social security number. So that's fundamental. The benefit coming off of that, and we use it in the age verification program, the other fundamental benefit of that, though, is that becomes the basis for doing blockchains, which are really nothing more than digital contracts. But how do you have digital signatories saying, with proof that I am who I am? If I buy a house, I should be able to do it online with, all of these digital tokenization things. And when it gets hacked, they can't resolve who I am. So that whole idea, that thread is going to be moving forward. The key and the beauty about loyalty programs is all laws out there pretty much allow you to do whatever you want as long as you disclose it clearly to the consumer. And so loyalty programs give you that opportunity to say, this is what I'm going to do. And you're okay with me doing this so long as I do it. The only caution I would have there is think in terms of a consumer, be a consumer. What would you find abusive? And maybe it's just a few items about me that you track, but you track everything else about me in an anonymous fashion, so that you pick up trends. And that brings up the next issue, or the next opportunity for us, which is what I call synthetic individuals. In theory, if I have all of these tokenized identity values that develop out there, I can now become a synthetic individual. You know nothing about me, but you know everything about my qualities. You know what my card number is. You know what my age is. You know that I'm a U.S. citizen, but you don't know who I am unless I tell you who I am. And I think that's where we're heading. Because if we don't head in that direction, I can tell you that Google will go there first, or Facebook.
Interesting, very interesting. And as we talk about loyalty, to talk about this idea of digital identities, one of the big sweet spots in the C-store industry right now in terms of sales is, tobacco, vaping products. But there's a big concern with the illegal activity of minors and increased usage among high schoolers and even middle schoolers. Can you speak a little bit about your age verification efforts?
Yeah, I've got 5 teenagers, so this is what drives me, right? The issue with age verification, we've done a pretty good job of just doing the analog verification off of driver's licenses. We partner with the WeCard program for over 20 years. Our availability is down around 10% across the industry. And so what we're looking to do now is take the digital capabilities. By virtue of upgrading because of PCI and EMV, we now have these really sophisticated point of sale systems that can do all kinds of scanning and so forth. So the age verification program is really a kind of a standardization of what's been out there for a while using a driver's license. But it's also implementing a data minimization standard. I've seen implementations of electronic age verification where all 33 items that came off the back of my PDF 417 document on my license are up on a screen. Well, if I'm wearing a body cam and I work at 7-Eleven, I'm going to see 300 driver's licenses, and I can literally capture all the driver's license information for those people. So what we're really trying to do is data minimize to a point where even if I intercepted the authentication of that customer, I would still need a DMV database to resolve who they are. And then once it goes into our system, we create a pseudonymous persona. It's a one-way hash. And from there, we now are just issuing single-use tokens for that consumer to use, which also enables then the consumer to go online and buy beer from our stores and prove that they are of age without being in front of them, and then prove that they're of age at point of delivery, which to me closes that big loop of how do we get online. Yes, it's one thing to sell a sandwich, but 50% of our sales are age verified. Wouldn't it be great to increase our online sales 50% by being able to do online age verification? So that's really where we're headed on the age verification program, and we're making it free. The idea is the best way to remove friction out there in the marketplace, because we want everybody to support it. It's free to any retailer, not just convenience stores, and the operation is going to be free. And that comes from the public benefit side of saying, we shouldn't be making money out of making sure our kids don't take up smoking, vaping, or drinking beer. That's just something we should be doing as a business partnership.
This is going to be very interesting. It sounds like then over the next next year, or even this fall, that there's a real opportunity to actually transform how retail does business, and in terms of also protecting its customers and its consumers and customer data. Maybe taking a step back though and looking at the store itself, cybersecurity is a meaningful problem. There have been a lot of public announcements of breaches in C-stores and the like. Can you speak to that? What's happening on that front, and how should operators be thinking about cybersecurity?
Yes, so it's an interesting connection to what we're trying to do long term in identity. We're working with DHS on coming up, Department of Homeland Security, to come up with an ecosystem that is interoperable, trusted service provider based, and tokenized identity. So if you think about what's the benefit of that, if 70% of my hacks are coming because I have lost my identity to a foreign agent or somebody who wants to come in, and they are now replicating what I know, what I have, then maybe that's the point we ought to go. We can't let up on protecting our systems, but I think long term the capitulation is stop thinking in terms of if I get hacked to when I get hacked, what data do they get? And so it's about, we need to keep going on unique identifiers to get on board, and when tokenized identity comes around, how do we leverage that? And how do we do that before supercomputers fall into the wrong hands? Because there isn't a password out there that can't get hacked from a supercomputer. So the shot clock is ticking on that one. And then how do we make sure that all data that we have is encrypted? And how do we handle and manage endpoints? But it's a balance, right? It's, if I'm getting into the web space and I need to have multiple connections, which is what our APIs do that we're working on, I need to have a better way of managing which connections I can go to, and they all need to be store initiated. So we can't let up on what we're doing, but we need to be honest with ourselves and say this will never be enough. And we need to start fundamentally changing how people have access to the data, and if they do, it's encrypted and it is segmented in such a way that it's just not worth doing that.
This is kind of intriguing as I think about our conversation here and kind of where the market is headed. What we've talked about in terms of loyalty, what we've talked about in terms of cybersecurity and the like, there's a meaningful kind of bar here in terms of what operators need to do. And then I think about 153,000 C-stores in North America and their technology profile, if you will, or their capabilities. Certainly there are many that are up there and exceeding and pushing the bar. But it seems like the vast majority are not. Do you have any kind of guidance as to kind of how do we start to bridge this gap between where we need to be and where we actually are?
Yeah, that's a great point. So we also need to start road mapping how we get out of this distributed computing system, which is why I went back originally saying, look, we better figure out our data communications. You hear a lot of folks saying in the cloud. We have a standard that's coming out that allows you to actually do POS in the cloud, tax calculations and all that. That's part of our unified commerce initiative. But if I don't have reliable communications, I can't do that. CI/CD, what the other sophisticated retail channels are doing, constant development, constant integration, can't happen in our existing infrastructure. It can't happen with these monolithic POSs and back offices out there where I have to push out huge code implementations. It just takes way too long. And so that, I think, is what's going to drive us to cloud. That terminal on your front counter is going to become dumber and dumber. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way. It's going to become more of a Swiss Army knife. It's going to be able to do what it does really well. It's going to be able to capture data. It's going to be able to print out a receipt, show what's going on in the transaction. But there may be nothing else running in that machine. Everything else is running on an edge server or running up in a cloud, and it's totally predicated upon what I'm doing at the time. So I could be taking a lottery transaction. It's going through the cash register. So I think that's where we need to start thinking about is how do we move capabilities from these systems that are out there and remote and move them into a more centralized location, which is what Amazon does. You know, Amazon wrote APIs in 2002 that you still use today. And when you go up on Amazon today, you'll be using an API that was written last night. How do we get to that same sort of footprint? That's innovation.
Great. As I think about it, I guess kind of thinking about we've done a fairly robust job here of kind of talking about some of the key issues facing the industries. If you would, can you comment on where is the opportunity? Where would you put your finger in terms of maximizing the leverage of the advantage in the C-store industry in terms of being able to grow its business space? What is it that we should be focused on in terms of, as an industry, in terms of dealing with all these competitive pressures, all these regulatory issues that we need to be thinking about?
So I would start with 10-year back thinking, and I would do it by location, or at least by region. So if I had a 10-store chain, I would look at each store and I would say, look, 10 years from now, what's that store going to be selling? Traditionally, our stores sell the same 3,500 SKUs and do the same things. All right. I think the big opportunity for us is rethinking what that physical location represents as far as the value stack to the consumer. And it's not going to be very traditional. You might have a store over here that just had 5 restaurants closed around it. And maybe what you're doing is expanding the food service in that store alone and the food service concept. I think a huge opportunity for us is connecting with online sellers and helping them with the 1-hour delivery time. I call it magic bullet marketing. If I'm driving from Austin to Dallas and I need a cable, why can't I order it from Amazon and meet it in Italy, Texas at a Shell station? Why not just take it out there? So is there a way that we can become that edge distribution center? Isn't there a way that we can partner up with other companies who are trying to reach the customer? Because we have last mile resolve. And how do I best serve the community around me, which is going to be different from place to place. And we've got a great tailwind right now. All the data is pointing to people moving out of the cities into the suburbs, buying cars and not using mass transit. So we got 5 years of a surf here that we need to use now to think about 10 years from now. When it all settles down, what's it going to be like? Mobility is going to be back being a problem. Fuel is going to be back being a problem. People may be moving back into the cities again. So it's really about, in 10 years, where do I need to be? Where's society going to be? And then what's my roadmap to get there? So I'm not getting jarred like pandemic did to us. All of a sudden we woke up one morning and we all had to be able to do curbside collect. So that to me is where I would go. And also understand and embrace the fact that not every store and not every retail location is going to be the same. Cookie cutter will not cut it anymore.
No, that's tremendous. The last mile advantage has always been the C-store's huge advantage over restaurant, over a grocery, over even the dollar stores too. You're in the community. The people know you, and you're able to adapt and align to their needs. This has been a tremendous conversation. Gary, I want to thank you very much for your time and for sharing your insights. To our audience, I want to encourage you to, let's not let this be the end of it. We just touched on a lot of the key issues that are facing the industry, and we're providing our email and our LinkedIn. We want to continue this conversation. We want to be able to continue the dialogue. There's much to talk about, but my big takeaway from this conversation is, there are meaningful challenges that are facing the industry, but we, in the near term, have some meaningful opportunities too as well to kind of grow our business and prepare for the future too as well. And our strong encouragement is, as a community, sharing these ideas and continuing this dialogue can help each other out to kind of grow the industry, even amidst all the things like outdoor EMV liability shift and cybersecurity and all the other things that are facing the industry too as well. Thank you very much for participating, and enjoy the rest of the show. Thank you.